Greetings, greetings, greetings again. Long time no chat. Like what's it been 45 minutes? Maybe an hour? Well, just because I know you care, the turkey came out just fine. So it is resting right now while we enjoy this next hour with Max Freeman, founder of Epic Cash. I am so delighted that both Yoga, who was with me at noon, and Max carved out, see what I did there? Carved out part of their Thanksgiving day to be able to share it with you and me. So Max Freeman, welcome to the show. Happy Thanksgiving.
Gobble, gobble, gobble.
Not yet, but soon, So Max, just I know that you watched the Todd Lewis show that he was on with me very recently. Gosh, was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday. And we covered a lot on Mimblewimble, and you had sent a message saying great interview, some notes I took, maybe ideas for future content. And so I looked at all of those and I'm like, check. Yeah, love it. Unpack that. So let me just hand it over to you and take your notes. And do you have those in front of you, or do you want me to?
I don't. If you could run them through, that'd be great.
Yeah. So history of bugs in XMR and Zcash, a lot,
Right.
and how those aren't issues here.
Yeah, so the moon math, as it's called, of the zero knowledge proof, I believe Zcash uses snarks, and after that, Starks became a thing. But the problem is that it's so complex that there's only a handful of people in the world that are smart enough to understand it, and it's a lot of complexity, a lot of detail, and Mimblewimble is just dramatically simpler, as Todd puts it. Our 0 lines of code is guaranteed to have more bugs or less bugs than 14,000 or whatever lines of code in some other system. And so it doesn't get any more simplistic and elegant and bug proof and idiot proof as Mimblewimble. And I think I would agree with Todd's assessment. I haven't historically put it in such stark terms, but when he described it and said that the prior approaches are simply obsolete, I think that makes sense, because in an era of email, people just use less postal mail, and telegrams are a distant memory.
Yes. Okay, that's excellent. All right, note number 2, cryptographic confidentiality versus shell game confidentiality.
Well, let's hold that thought and just tie up the first one. So Zcash, so Zcash had an unlimited, a hidden inflation bug that would have allowed unlimited minting for, I think it was 2 years. And this is despite peer review and code audits, which show how tricky this type of stuff can be. And so I don't know whether it was definitively concluded that it wasn't exploited, or whether it may have been, but nobody knows because it's so complex. The market seems to be fairly satisfied that the integrity is there, but the fact that it went undiscovered for so long is fairly terrifying, at least to me. And so Zcash has had its share of challenges, and Monero has had a steady stream of bugs and problems. Not to beat up on them, because they've had a bit of a rough patch lately, and there's a great crossover in our community and presence, a present overlapping of people that very deeply care about both. Then this leads into the second point, but the approach of Monero that uses this shell game of essentially hiding, hoping that you can make it hard to find, but it's still findable, is different than the way that we go about it, where the information simply isn't there. And there's revelations such as, oh, if you sent 2 transactions within 10 minutes, you don't have any privacy. Or like there's this initiative from, I think it's Comply First or something. The guy's name is Justin. But anyway, the idea is that convincing users to give up their view keys so that they can let their transactions be spied on. But then you've compromised the integrity of the privacy for all the other users. And so that's a very dangerous, slippery slope to step down even the first millimeter. And that's rightfully a point of a very robust passion discussion over there. And so there's all these issues that are design, which after all came much later, an eternity in dog years in technological terms in crypto. Things move very fast, and our architecture is years later than those. And we just don't have those kind of problems, and we're never going to have those kind of problems.
I am going to write down this word, obsolete, because I'm one of those dudes that when I write it down, it sticks. And that is exactly, I really liked how Todd said that. And thank you for reinforcing that today. So all right. So are you cool? We've covered the confidentiality versus shell game confidentiality. It's kind of like if AI ultimately is able to reverse engineer all of that, the information would be there. But with Mimblewimble, there's just no information. So if you crack the code and you open it up and it's just nothing but air, what's better than that?
Yeah. I mean, the way I look at it is if you walk into a room and there's a puddle of water on the floor and somebody says, there was an ice sculpture here. Well, you know how much, like how big it could have been from the volume of water, but you can't know the shape of the sculpture. The information is lost. Or like, let's say you're standing on the sidewalk and you have a 3-dimensional person leaving a 2-dimensional representation on the sidewalk. You've lost all of that data. And so the Mimblewimble compression, the coin join, and the cut through in particular, the Peterson commitments also play a role, but Todd is really the one to speak about that. You essentially lose all the information. And so the sleep at night factor of worrying about that next breakthrough Rain Man type of math genius that figures out how to undo all this, or what does quantum mean, who knows. Here it's just safer. And in an era of totalitarian tyranny enforced by AI in real time, your transactions today could land you in very serious trouble tomorrow, because they're tearing down statues of our former heroes based on the changing mores of today. And so maybe what you do today becomes a crime later, and now you have a problem. With Epic, you simply don't have that set of concerns.
And I would remind everyone that you could go buy 1 Monero now, or you could go buy 150 Epic Cash. Just saying. Okay, the next bullet, how Mimblewimble could do other coin stuff we wanted to, if we wanted to.
Right. So the shell game, if you want to construct rings and pass back and forth between friends, however you want, a lot of that type of stuff can be done at the wallet layer. And then if you really want a higher degree of privacy, let's say an accumulator-based structure, we've been looking quite a bit at Lelantis. There's the possibility of sort of a, ultra, like if you really want to make sure that last bit of nobody's seeing anything, and it's worth it to jump through hoops, excuse me, or wait a little longer, or pay a little higher fee or something. There's, as Todd says, when I ask him, can we do something? And he always goes, does it involve banging zeros and ones together? Yes, Todd. And he's like, okay, tell me how much money we have, and then I know how many man hours it'll take, and we can get to it. That's always the answer. So really, it's a wonderfully flexible architecture that is a great place to start, rather than these like very Rube Goldbergian sort of like, let me strap a turbocharger on my horse to make it go faster type of thing.
Right. And I'm always reminded of when you break things down to the ridiculously simple. I loved in that Indiana Jones show where there's that guy with the sword coming out and he's doing all of these fancy and then Indiana Jones just looks at him and goes and shoots it. It's just less is more. Mimblewimble is simple. You don't have to swing swords. All right, another bullet: mathematical proof of correctness. Short, easy versus long, obtruse.
Yeah, so yeah, there's only a very small number of advanced math type of people that can understand the math that underpins Zcash in particular, and Mimblewimble is very simple. It's just basic algebra, and so again, opacity and complexity are the enemies of high quality and feeling sure that there's not going to be any problems. And so, as Todd says, when faced with an engineering choice between a simpler approach and a more complicated approach, just you always want to go with the simpler one because it reduces the scope of problems. And with software, they're complex systems where a problem in one area can create consequences in another. And the simpler you can make a system, the more you can do with it. Because if you look at the challenges that some of the legacy financial institutions, i.e. banks, are saddled with, high costs, and they're slow moving and very bureaucratic. And that's in many cases because they've got systems running on big iron COBOL machines from the 1960s. And they just have all these antiquated systems that have never been upgraded for whatever reason. And by starting with a clean slate, we can do a lot more with it because there's less of what's known as technical debt in our architecture.
Man, I just have one phrase that keeps coming to mind: Occam's Razor. It just seems like Mimblewimble and Occam's Razor would probably go to the bar together and get along really well. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Occam's Razor. What is it? It's usually the simplest explanation is the best. I think that's what it is. All right. Next bullet: history of innovation in crypto since 2008.
Yeah. So Epic is how Satoshi would have obviously done Bitcoin in 2019 based on the advancements in technology that came out since 2008. And again, remember, we know from 10 years of actual real life field trial experiments of all these altcoins, what works and more importantly, what doesn't. And so in BTC, you have this point of centralization around mining hardware production because there's only a handful of specialized providers, manufacturers that work in a single country. And if you want to be involved in the mining, you have to have relationships with those people because the equipment obsolesces so fast and you have to replace it on an approximately 2-year cycle, that it becomes very strategic to have someone in Shanghai or Almaty or any one of these other hotspots of mining that can give you access to the gear. And so the answer to that is a multi-algorithm structure where you can do the proof of work on a number of hardware types. For those that are new to Epic, ours uses 48% on CPU, so laptops and servers at this point. Mobile is coming, we're working on it. We're promising next year, but pushing as fast as we can. So CPU is 48%, GPU is 48% of the blocks. They come out 1 per minute, and then 4% is ASIC. So multi-algorithm spreads the coins around into a wider group of hands and avoids the centralization issues that BTC will continue to experience there. And then also in 2014, Monero came out with its privacy, which offers fungibility. And so if 5 years later, Satoshi would have built it based on the Monero structure, very obviously. And then in 2016, the paper came out, and it took a few years to get out of the lab. But the next major quantum leap forward in cryptocurrency blockchain tech is Mimblewimble. And that addresses the fungibility issue, as does the crypto note structure that Monero uses, in a way that also also has the extraordinary benefit of scalability, and that helps Epic to avoid another point of centralization that BTC has, which is around the size of the chain file. If you want to run a full node, it's 355 gigabytes on disk, which takes days, if not weeks, to download. And it's also very slow because every transaction needs to be run through, and so you can only do about 5 per second. Out of the box, Epic does 17 per second, and it's a 2 gigabyte chain file. And we're doing some tweaking on our Canary network that we'll be talking more about later in this episode here, called ECK, that'll really push the capacity into the hundreds and then eventually thousands of transactions per second on a single shard, without compromising on any of the assurance guarantees that we've established. So it's a really strong design with a lot of future ahead, and it's very early days.
Well, I don't want to ruin your Thanksgiving, but I hear you that Bitcoin is 2008 technology, but don't know if you ever heard of this guy. But can you see the layer 2, the Lightning Network? Layers are really cool, Max. You should check them out.
Little Dustine.
Dustine, can you just give us a little bit of your inside knowledge on what layer 2 will mean for Bitcoin and why we should not be excited about
it? If I owned shares in a bank that was going to be getting involved in that gravy train, I would be very excited. But essentially what that is a implementation of the fractional reserve trust and permission-based banking system overlaid atop the BTC blockchain. So this idea that you can create other layers on top is true, but to compare it to what we're doing is to compare it. What was his name? The very offensive, rude guy. Oh yes, Hodl. He said comparing Epic to BTC is like a bulldozer and a pooper scooper, and I couldn't help myself. I retorted instantly, yes, I'm happy to man the heavy machinery here. And so essentially their layer 2 argument is that you can put a turbocharger on the side of your horse and compare it to not just a Porsche turbo, but also the next generation Tesla that we'll be developing in the years to come. It's absurd, and it's only possible when you mute the person who's trying to speak back and you shout over them, and you're doing the testosterone fueled bro thing rather than the nerd facts thing. But since we're talking about nerd facts, the fact is that you require 2 transactions to on-ramp your money to the bank and then off-ramp it out of the bank. So you've exacerbated the fee pressure by creating this permanent excess elevated demand on layer 1 for those Lightning channel transactions that only the big guys can afford. So your ability to send a transaction from a ledger to your buddy to settle your poker bill goes away, because we already saw $63 fees in April of this year. And if the maxis are right and it gets to 100 grand, well, guess what? You're going to see your first $500 average transaction fee week, or maybe even 1,000. Who knows? Because it went to $81 in the peak of the last boom in December 2017. So be careful what you wish for, because in this case, all it's going to mean is driving all of the BTC into the hands of the few financial institutions that can afford to set up channels between themselves. And then what you've done is you've taken an asset that theoretically you can hold your own keys to and transact on L1, and you've given up the position of power and relevance and the main nexus of activity from that L1 to this centralized network of banks that operate a trust and permission-based access point to that network. So you're jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire. And that story will play out in the fullness of time. But it's really a dead end.
I loved how Todd Lewis basically was just kind of astonished. He says, if you want to do that, why did you ever get out of fiat? Right? Why not just keep it at the bank? You know,
Well,
it's the same thing.
well, actually, it's worse because one day we should go through the Coinbase account application because I read it recently and it says that if you inherited money from a relative, they need to know the nature of the business that that relative operated. Like, are you kidding me? The level of intrusiveness, like, tell me all your business partners and your top products. I mean, like, are you kidding me? Are you an industrial like espionage agency? Or are you trying to determine if I'm a money launderer? Because this seems like abusive and intrusive, far beyond the dreams of,
Do you know when you sent that around and I read that, I thought you were punking us. I literally did. I'm like reading through that, just thinking this is kind of a meme, but you were dead serious.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. One of Coinbase's major revenue line items is as they call it, partnering with intelligence services. So
Yeah.
God forbid you pay somebody that okay, this Kyle Rittenhouse thing. Who are the good guys and who are the bad guys again? Like, if I donate using BTC to the wrong side, am I going to have the Stasi knock on my door?
Right.
Probably. Right,
Wow.
like they did it to
Yeah.
WikiLeaks. Like you're a terrorist funder. You're not like like re-educated appropriately. I mean, who knows? But like you can avoid all of that if you just use HTTPS, and so it's kind of obvious that that's where it's going to go.
Yes, yes. Okay. Next bullet. How absurd full observability is with the other chains.
So imagine if you went on a blind date and then you were tethered to that person for the rest of your life. That's the equivalent here. If I buy a loaf of bread from the baker with an observable chain, then we can both observe everything about each other's money indefinitely. And so I don't want each transaction to enable whoever I'm transacting with to get all up in my business and know all about my money. And I also think that the, let's say, data theft industry, all of our identities and all of our personal information has long been out for sale on dark webs, marketplaces of various sorts. Target, Experian. Every other day, I get a letter from the bank saying, "Oh, there's a data breach," and well, what is like FC42 LLC, PO Box, Wilmington, Delaware, and why are you sending me a 17-page letter that says that my information was compromised? But there's nobody to contact or what to do. I just got one of those the other day, and so it's like I'm going to make a virus and then sell antivirus software, kind of a thing. And
All
so
right.
if you have one piece of data about somebody and then you match it with another piece of data and another piece of data, like this whole Twitter, post your BTC address on your Twitter type of idea. Well, guess what? Like 20 years from now, someone somewhere is going to be able to knock on your door because of some obscure metadata leak that you could have never imagined and have no control over. It's just dangerous.
So this is one thing that really kind of impacted me when on my journey to trying to figure all of this stuff out is I didn't really realize that if I hold a Bitcoin right now, that there could have been 6 hops back an illegal transaction or something nefarious, right? That will always follow that Bitcoin, and you just never know at what point in time, a 3-letter agency or someone who cares out there, because they can surveil, is going to look at the Bitcoin that you hold and basically say, nope, we know where that's been. That's frozen. That's called a tainted Bitcoin. Those are a real thing, right, Max?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure the people in Canada that use BitBuy and TradeOgre, I've happened to have seen the account emails from those two. But essentially, if you take BTC out of a venue that is considered to be high risk, such as TradeOgre, they will basically, either tell you or ask you not to do that. And if you do, then they will freeze your money and close your account. because there are very strict penalties for the implementation of what's known as AML, or anti-money laundering, CFT, counter funding of terrorism, and also KYC, know your customer, KYT, know your transaction, and also the travel rule, and then probably the 27 other things that have come up since the last time I took the time to familiarize myself with that list. So, you've just got this ever-shifting thicket of laws, and code is simple, laws are tricky. The infrastructure bill makes us all criminals, and so obviously that can't stand. But in the intervening time, when we all are criminals, and there's a lot of haze and fog of war in the air, until and unless that gets changed, then it's a whole set of concerns. And so one of the good parts about the Epic design is that it follows the original Bitcoin design exactly, which has been explicitly recognized as legal, not just in the United States, but in other places. And ultimately, if you get really down to it, it's protected under free speech laws, because if you craft a transaction, that's just a hexadecimal encoded string. And how can you prevent somebody from saying that? If you have, then you probably have bigger problems in your society than, the nuances of using cryptocurrency or not.
So are you telling me Bitcoin is not a security?
So BTC is not a security, but some of the things that BTC turns into are. So for example, wrapped Bitcoins, arguably, I would say, are a security. So there's 250,000 BTC wrapped into WBTC. And those are a token issued by a company called BitGo. And so if the SEC says, hey, you're issuing securities and you shouldn't be, and then they sue them and they win, and then they go after the BTC, the asset underlying it emerges. So when you get into DeFi, and is it wrapped or pegged or any of this type of stuff, the devil's in the details, and the nuances matter. But essentially, the BTC, or let's say original Bitcoin network design that BTC and Epic both follow, is explicitly not a security. The SEC said that Ethereum, or Ether, when it first came out, was a security because they did an ICO and it was 70% pre-mined, and they raised a lot of money from investors. So they actually did a securities offering, but by then it was beyond the point where it could be censored, because at that point it was predominantly GPU mineable. And so if they said it was illegal, there's nothing they could have done about it anyway. So they made the wise choice to say, well, that's an exception, but don't do it again. And then everything since then, the SEC has basically said it's a security, unless you can meet these tests that mean that it's not. And so we actually started with Epic not from a tech perspective. I mean, yes, we did, of course, but it was really the hard part was figuring out the regulatory compatibility aspects. Right. And for every hour spent with a tech guy, it was at least an hour spent with lawyers. And you ask 3 lawyers, you get 4 opinions. And at the end of the day, it was just, okay, we got to just be so far on the compliance side and censorship resistant, and the no ICO, no pre-mine, not a corporation, no VC, volunteer model came out of the regulatory. And in a lot of ways, it made things much harder because we're competing against very well-funded outfits out there. I mean, when people look at Epic versus Solana, okay, well, we don't seem quite as impressive, but we also didn't raise, billions of dollars in VC. So it's not exactly the same.
And when you get to the definition of impressive, it's not if, it's when, with Epic Cash. All right, let's go to market for computation services, alternative uses for CPU, GPU power.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. So we recently entered a new phase of price discovery based on recent growth, and we briefly touched our all-time high in Satoshi terms, which was around 6,000, which was, I think, just under $4, something like that, and had a bit of a retrace in dollar terms into the twos. So I think it's from 6,000 down to 4,000 or 4,500 in sats. So what, about 30 30% and about maybe 40% in dollars. So a big decline. Nothing changed, but markets overshoot in both directions. And so what we saw is that the CPU hash rate fell off a cliff. I mean, the CPU hash rate is down by like 60 or 70% or something, but the GPU miners are a lot more sticky and loyal, and that's only down, I think, about 20%. And so the market for CPU hash rate was a lot more responsive and quick to come on. When we were going for a run, a lot of people switched their cloud farms, which is mainly how Monero is mined, because we share the same RandomX algorithm. A lot of the RandomX miners moved back to Monero or some other RandomX coin, but the GPU miners stayed with us. And so that tells me that we made a really wise choice that we may want to even take another look at, to give more to the GPU miners, because we did 38% and now it's 48%. And if those guys are going to be more loyal and also get more involved, and less likely, it makes sense to assume to go and dump right away. They're more, long-term spec miners rather than pay the bills today miners. We should be taking a hard look at even tweaking that some more. And that's a great thing for the governance group.
I agree 100%. Because that, when people see the price go down, I mean, nobody in the community that I know is out there selling their Epic Cash. I mean, it has to be miners, right?
Well, I mean, whenever we see a seller, thank you for your service, because every trade in the market needs a buyer and a seller. A lot of people are unaware that a halving happened. A lot of people are unaware that the ECR snapshot is coming, and they're essentially giving away a free ECR for the price of a knockdown price Epic. The volume, I mean, we did over 10 BTC. I think it was $750,000 in a 24-hour period. I think I saw about 2 weeks ago. And now it's only like tens of thousands. And so not only is the price down, but there's hardly any sales here. And so one of the things that I know certain people are working on is our equivalent of an Epic market cap service that reflects more accurately the unique dynamics of our market versus CoinGecko or CoinMarketCap or one of these other services, because people just see the price refresh and like, oh my God, I lost all my money. I'm so sad. Like, what happened? And then you go, absolutely nothing. In fact, wow, there were three more good things that happened since the last time you checked. Well, why did the market go down? Well, if you go and look, one guy sold 3 coins.
True.
So I just wasted 20 minutes of my day and stress. Like, just turn it off. And so if we go to let's check volume weighted over 24 hours or something, and like show more than just the single price point. I mean, for BTC, like it's to the microsecond, the price changes and it's relevant and it's deep and liquid and all that good stuff. Here, like check in once a week, once a day. Like we gotta cool it with the price refresh stuff, because that doesn't help us get where we.
And you know, just speaking from a newbie's perspective, it's just kind of like you're trained on that when you come from the school of TCV and you're in 25 different coins and all of that. It's just like you get that Blockfolio thumb to where Coin Market Cap thumb to where you just keep hitting refresh and stuff. So it's like everything seems to be around price, and which is why when I consolidated my holdings to Epic Cash, I love being narrow and deep, because now I can really take the time to be educated on all of this. And now I look at this stuff, and the people I bring into it, it goes up and down, and I get and now I get all the calls it used to get from me, Max, and now it's like, don't worry about it. I do have to give a shout out. I did a show with yoga, and then I had basically 45 minutes to be able to check my turkey and then accomplish one very important thing. And Max, you'll be proud of me. So I finally have my youngest. So now I have all of my 4 daughters. They all have a Vitix wallet and they all have Epic Cash. So in that 45 minutes, I got my daughter Vlada set up with Epic Cash, and she's super excited. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm gonna check here how many holders we're up to and see if we cracked 1,300. I don't look at the price too much, but I do look at the holders. Maybe you can find it faster. Too many tabs. Okay, there we go. So the last time I had this screen up, it was 1262. Hey, 1302. Okay, so
Nice.
and those are just the ones that didn't pull the coins off to the local wallet.
Yeah.
So like it's probably well over 2,000. And so every time we figure out a way to make it easier for people to come on board, it leads to a new wave of activations. So I am up to about half of my apartment complex here. There's about 50 workers, and every time I see people, I'm like, hey, thanks for grabbing the package for me. By the way, like instead of giving you $5 as a tip, you got 2 minutes, let me set you up with a crypto wallet. And it's all
Right.
the little things of like, oh, my eyesight is bad and I can't see the light gray box, or my screen is cracked, or I write my seed words down on a napkin and throw them away, or it's wonderful to do that hands-on and learn. And then once we make it easy, there's so much less friction and less people that like say, it's not worth it, it's too hard, maybe this is not for me, and they get through it, and then they tell a friend. If you do the math on even where we are, if we can get to the point where each of us tells 3 people and they tell 3 people and they tell 3 people, I mean, we can have the whole planet covered in the blink of an eye. We really can.
Which, by the way, I want to let everyone know, if you're new here or just watching this, if you go down below and you check in that little triangle in the upper right, and you click on that, it'll open up my show description. And within there, it is just a treasure trove of links that will solve anything. I mean, you can find anything in there. And there's a place on how to buy Epic Cash. Captain Pi has done 2 fantastic articles, the epicness of Epic Cash, and one that has to do with wealth. I can't remember his final title for that. But there are those things that you can go, and we talk about trying to make it easier for people. The reason why I'm here and I'm hosting Max and others and Todd Lewis, and I want to give you content so that you can be able to share it with others. You may be into Epic Cash already, and it may be your interest, but if you have some loved ones that you'd like to get involved, you don't have to become the expert. Just have them subscribe to this channel. Tell them to look in the show description, go down, just click through some of the links, and they can start their own self-study. And we really, really invite everybody to come to our Telegram, t.me/Epic Cash. And if you want to get an education in crypto, blockchain technology, and Epic Cash, please visit t.me Freeman/Freeman U, FREEMANU. And you'll literally learn so much in crypto years. Before, there's a few more points, but we have basically 18 minutes, and I do want to keep this to an hour. I know you wanted to talk about a few things: X, snapshot, volunteers, etc. Max, let's move on from Mimblewimble, and you want to talk about X, ECK?
Yeah, so let me actually do E1 first. So E1 is our equivalent of wrapped Bitcoin, or REN BTC. So WBTC is 14 billion in market cap. REN uses a slightly different approach to wrap their tokens, and they're at about 1 billion market cap. And so E1 is a single Epic coin wrapped into an ERC20 token. And that will be achieved through our partner WandChain, that uses secure multi-party computation on their network of nodes that it breaks up the keys so that no one node has those keys. And so it's very secure, and it allows us to achieve a wrapped coin structure akin to what's proven in WBTC and RenBTC, but upgrade the permissionlessness and trustlessness and censorship resistance versus those. And so just QED, if those are successful and we are able to improve on certain blockers that would prevent more people from using them, because after all, it's only about 250,000 out of 18 million. We think we can do better than that. And so why would somebody wrap their Epic into a token, which sacrifices the confidentiality? Because of course, as an ERC20 riding on Ethereum or Avalanche, Polkadot, Solana, any one of these blockchains, they're completely observable. And so while it's wrapped in the token, you lose the confidentiality. Well, that's a bug for some people, but a feature for others. And specifically organizations like crypto.com, Coinbase, and also Kraken in the UK just delisted Monero. So those places would never be able to offer Epic natively, but they can offer any one token because it's completely observable. And if somebody chooses at some point to do something else with it, that's neither here nor there for their purposes of how they manage their business. So it unlocks different venues, and it also enables Epic to plug into almost, I would say pretty much everything that exists in DeFi, because from peer-to-peer lending like Aave, services like 1inch, Compound, Curve, Balancer, I mean, you name it, all of the good stuff that made DeFi what it is, up to almost $3 trillion, becomes accessible to Epic holders at the small fee of wrapping. And you can also earn an income by farming and lending and doing all this DeFi stuff to earn some passive income according to your risk tolerance on all these different smart contract chains. So again, it enhances the utility. Even if you directly don't choose to participate in those, the fact that some others can and some will means that your asset becomes more valuable. And so this is a great example of the unique math of Metcalfe's law coming into effect here in a very tangible way. So Wenchin is a great partner. We're doing a weekly call with them every week, and just staying in touch. They've been very supportive, and we're working as hard as we can to get that going.
Question: do you need ECR to be able to wrap your Epic?
I have to check if that's technically feasible, but I believe so. I think we can put that in place. So, you know, it compromises the permissionlessness a bit. Maybe we would have it be like, you know, anybody can do it, but you get a discount. If yeah, let's say it's probably going to be like that. Now that I think of it,
and the reason why is I just want to keep reinforcing, because the snapshot is on December 25th, that the more Epic that you hold on December 25th, that's free ECR, a 1-to-1 match. Can you just share with people how big a deal that is? Because
yeah. I mean, if you owned shares in Coinbase, let's say you were an early employee, and then when they went public, that was a very good day for you because you made a lot of money, or Facebook or Google or any one of these startups. And so the bits of ECR that are hitting the market, I think somebody told me 3 cents the other day. I'm like, do you understand what you're selling? Probably not, because those are shares. That's the equity of our enterprise. Everything we do, everything we build, it's benefiting that. I mean, you're going to need that in all these various ways. You can't watch Netflix streaming movies unless you have a Netflix subscription, or Amazon Prime, or any one of those. And so we're targeting many trillions of dollars in market opportunities. This is our most crucial component outside of Epic itself. If Epic is the value transfer layer, then Epic is or ECR is our social layer. It's a tool for coordinating our activities in the absence of any formal structure of hierarchy and corporate structure, that type of thing, because people are just naturally incentivized to cooperate and do things like this show, and the people who are listening and doing all this great grassroots stuff. And so if you're selling your ECR today, ask yourself, do you really understand what you're selling? And why, is it worth why do you need 3 cents so bad to give up what could be absolutely enormous? And so I think, that's not a failure of the person on the sell side necessarily, as it is our failure of making the case of why ECR is going to be hopefully just as spectacular as Epic itself will be.
So do you see a future where, and I know you hate talking about price, but I just, this was discussed in another group, that ECR, I mean, it's not out of the question that ECR in a period of time could be $50, $100. I mean, we're not talking about, because when people are talking about pennies now, and that's why I'm like, this is going to allow you to be able to borrow from yourself, the bank of you. It's just this snapshot is so important,
Yeah. Let me just sell my coins and give most of the money to the tax man instead of borrowing it. No, okay, you need some ECR. It's like, you need the carbon and oxygen to make carbon dioxide, or H2O. You have to have both in the proper ratios. And so I think it's just an information deficit, and it's complicated what we're doing, and innovative in a lot of ways. And we just need to keep doing a better job of telling the story and making it easier to transact. So an update on that, where we finally had some traction on the resource side. It's been tough to get the bandwidth on the provider and get all the relevant people on the Zoom on the legal opinion. But I believe we have a call scheduled. I think it might be tomorrow. If not, it's certainly, days, not weeks away. And then they should turn it around pretty quickly. And then we can get ECR on either Bitmart, or there's another alternative that just popped up. And so the easy button and liquidity access for ECR will dramatically change here in the not too distant future, because as a token, we don't have to wait months for the engineering teams to integrate as we did with Bitmart. And that's another reason why E1 is going to be rocket fuel for Epic itself, because any platform can add an ERC20 token in 2 seconds, whereas with Mimblewimble, it's a much more complicated exercise than that.
Right. Okay, tell us about ECK.
Yeah, so ECK is a super exciting advanced features version of Epic. So ECK is what's known as a canary network. And so we're about to upgrade Epic to V3. And if you look at the features that are going to be coming in versions 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 of Epic, we're going to put those into ECK first and try to break them and battle test them and fix the bugs. And so it de-risks the implementation of those features into Epic itself. So we've got another development track. It's a chaos net, or a sandbox. So it enables us to retain the stability of Epic itself, but also gain the innovation, the flexibility of move fast and break things by having a parallel network. And so ECK begins life as a fork of Epic that is tuned for different settings. And the primary difference is that the emission and economics are tuned for velocity instead of hodling. And so Epic encourages what's known as a low time preference, or diamond hands. Because of the scarcity, it is good for you to hold it for longer if you can, because you'll tend to get a better price. ECK encourages spending. And the reason for that is we want to drive velocity and demand for transactions to see how high we can safely rev up the engine without blowing it up. So right now, Epic is a 1 megabyte block every 60 seconds, and that yields a throughput of 17 transactions a second. And we're going to be testing configurations in ECK up to the 1,000 transactions a second level without introducing sharding.
Is the BHAG, which for those who don't know what that is, it's a big hairy ass goal. Is the BHAG on that to be able to transact retail to where literally people would transact in Epic Cash, and to do that, it has to be as fast as Visa, MasterCard.
So that's an interesting question, because when is a transaction final? If you use Visa or MasterCard, there's 6 months of clawback period. So if I claim my card was stolen, I can get the money back. And so there's reserves and buffers and holdback periods baked into the economic arrangements, risk limits, and so on. And so Epic payments are truly immutable. And once they enter the mempool, which takes about 2 seconds to propagate worldwide, they cannot be recovered. And so you can safely let the customer walk out of the store within 2 seconds. And so when I swipe my credit card, half the time it asks me to call customer service for my protection because of fraud and this and that, and they ask me to press 7 and listen to a sales pitch, while I, am waiting on hold. I mean, we've all experienced that. Yep. So I would argue that it's dramatically faster in the ways that matter already today. But when you take it's about the throughput rather than the speed, because even at that 1,000 transactions a second level, and I'm deliberately being conservative by mentioning that figure versus the other ones that I believe are supportable. Again, we don't know until we really push it, which is why we need ECK. But even at 1,000 transactions a second, that is almost as big as Visa on a daily basis. And so if we can handle Visa, PayPal scale transaction throughput for a fraction of a penny with all these wonderful performance properties, I think it'll be a knockout. So really, what do we need all that transactional capacity for? 1,000's a good start, let's just say. Well, we're going to have this metaverse, and metaverse requires NFTs. And if we use observable NFTs on these other networks, then the totalitarian spy surveillance, thought crime guys are able to see and control and manipulate and block everything that you do indefinitely, whereas our pipe just moves the data and doesn't care whether you're watching a cartoon or something else. Right. So that changing social mores in these new virtual spaces. I mean, can you imagine that when we were all figuring out Facebook for the first time? I'm going to put a picture of a fry in my nose. Well, then somebody looks bad at you 10 years later, applying for a job or something. We can preserve what little is left of our privacy and our dignity if we move to these type of systems versus allowing ourselves to be boiled like frogs 1 degree at a time in these other structures.
Now, is ECK something that when it comes on the market, it'll be, I presume, a really low price, or is there a snapshot associated with ECK of any sort? Or
December 25th. So if you own one Epic as of December 25th, then you get one ECK.
And you also get one ECR.
And you may be noticing a trend here, so stay tuned for the other pieces of the network.
Oh my God. Okay, guys, that's a mic drop. I'm going to leave it on that, Max, because we're up to an hour, and I just want everyone to go back and just rewind the last 60 seconds and maybe listen to it about 50 times. It is good to be holding Epic Cash right now. Need I say more? I know
ain't seeing nothing yet, my friend.
Ain't seeing nothing yet. So, hey, Max, thank you very much. I hope you and your lovely wife have a great Thanksgiving. Appreciate you carving out an hour for us, and it just made this Thanksgiving a lot better. Thanks for the added info.
Always a pleasure. And if anybody's thinking about getting more involved, just DM me on Telegram, and we'll find a way to plug you in. Every little bit counts, and even a few minutes here and there. Our flood of mosquitoes, one little sip at a time, can end up with a really powerful river. So if you want to get more involved, DM me and we'll plug you in. Thanks, awesome. Everybody.
Okay. Thanks, everybody in the chat.